Before you read another line, do this now. Subscribe to this channel immediately. This video will reveal truths they scrub from archives, remove from curricula, and erase from memory. Subscribe so you won't miss the facts that could change everything. History is not just a record of events. It is the soil where identity grows, the story that shapes a people's courage, and the map that warns future generations. Erasure begins when that soil is quietly dug away, bit by bit. Power loves amnesia. Erase the memory of injustice, and you erase the obligation to repair it. Remove the stories of resistance, and you narrow the horizon of possibility. Forgetting becomes governance, a quieter, safer mode of control. Have you noticed how whole episodes of the past recede from public conversation, replaced by new narratives that flatter the powerful? Who decides which chapters stay and which vanish? The methods are surgical. Archives are reorganized, textbooks rewritten, public plaques reworded. What looks like administrative tidying is often a deliberate act of narrative pruning, removing inconvenient lines to tidy the story. Institutions play along. Museums recatalog items, libraries deaccession collections, and media outlets downplay inconvenient anniversaries. The architecture of remembrance is remodeled until the past no longer embarrasses the present. Erasure is economic as well as ideological. Funding for historical research is channeled away from uncomfortable topics and into projects that celebrate harmless achievements. Money steers memory toward safe stories. Have you ever wondered which historians receive grants and which questions are labeled too controversial to study openly? Who writes the proposals that get funded, and why? Monuments are not neutral stones. They are public arguments. When statues come down or plaques are rewritten, the argument shifts. Removing memory from public space reshapes civic imagination and weakens collective memory. Language is revised. Single words change the way events are framed. Rebels become militants, uprisings become disturbances, and nuance is shaved off until moral clarity disappears. Semantics becomes the scalpel of forgetting. Education is a front line. Curricula decide what children inherit. When lessons omit resistance, oppression, or the real costs of progress, generations grow up with gaps so wide they cannot even name what was lost. Ignorance becomes generational. Digital platforms accelerate erasure. Content is filtered, search results prioritized, and inconvenient archives buried beneath optimized narratives. Deletion now happens at scale, and what disappears from indexes effectively never existed for most. Ask yourself, what part of our past have you never been taught? And who might benefit from that silence? Official apologies sometimes finalize erasure. A token statement, a committee, a report, then quiet. The ritual appears moral, but often functions as a lid, not a remedy, allowing institutions to claim reconciliation while the truth is obscured. Cultural industries sanitize stories. Films, shows, and books rewrite complexities into palatable myths, smoothing contradictions so that uncomfortable histories are softened and the status quo looks benign. Entertainment becomes a tool of forgetting. Records vanish through bureaucratic shutters. Files lost, tapes corrupted, archives declared incomplete. Each administrative loss chips away at the paper trail that holds power accountable. Paperwork becomes a shield for impunity. Even artifacts are sold or displaced. Collections move from public custody to private vaults. Monuments are privatized, and the physical anchors of memory scatter where public access is harder to guarantee. Ownership can be erasure by relocation. Who benefits from a public that cannot remember? The answer is often the same: actors whose legitimacy depends on forgetting, corporations, regimes, elites who profit from a sanitized narrative. Ask, who profits when a history vanishes? Grassroots memory resists. Oral histories, family stories, Community rituals try to hold what institutions discard. But oral memory is fragile in a broadcast culture. It needs amplification to survive the machinery of forgetfulness. Legal frameworks also help erase. Statutes of limitations, amnesty laws, and secrecy orders can convert crimes into closed chapters. Legal closure may give peace to some, but it often closes the door on accountability and truth. Academic gatekeeping narrows inquiry. Journals, peer review, and citation practices establish what counts as legitimate history. Marginalized perspectives are dismissed as peripheral, and the canon consolidates a comfortable, controllable past. Think about how many textbooks tell a tidy story with heroes and villains clearly assigned, and how many real lives are reduced to footnotes, if mentioned at all. History's omissions are political choices. Memory economies are real. Corporations buy naming rights to museums and archives, influencing exhibitions and education. When private capital sets the terms of remembrance, public truth becomes negotiable. Digital memory is mercilessly curated. Search algorithms and platform policies determine which documents surface in seconds and which disappear into the dark web of ignored content. The past is filtered by code. Have you ever tried to find a primary account of a controversial event and found only sanitized versions? Who profited from the official narrative being the most visible one? State narratives often recast traumatic events as foreign interference, anomalies, or necessary sacrifices. Reframing trauma as either negligible or justified changes how society heals, often preventing real justice. Museums and memorials can become instruments of control when curated to comfort rather than challenge. Exhibitions that sanitize violence turn public memory into a balm for conscience, not a call to action. Grassroots archives are fragile but crucial. Community-led preservation, oral tapes, family albums, local museums keeps counter-narratives alive. Yet these projects are constantly starved of funding and visibility. Education reforms that omit, rather than contextualize, difficult chapters produce citizens who lack the vocabulary of critique. Without names, dates, and lessons, people cannot hold systems accountable. Ask yourself, if the story of resistance was erased in your town, how would that change how you see your rights today? Propaganda is not only forward-looking, it rewrites the past to justify the present. By sanitizing what came before, current power structures brand themselves as the conclusion of an inevitable arc, and inevitability is hard to resist. Crisis narratives are used to fast-track forgetting. In emergencies, histories are sidelined, archives neglected, and policy windows open for irreversible change under the cover of urgency. Time becomes an accomplice to erasure. The architecture of remembrance is adaptable. When one method fails, another emerges. Digital deletion, curriculum changes, legislative erasure, or privatization. The forms shift, but the effect, the disappearance of uncomfortable truth, remains constant. Cultural amnesia is a strategic asset. A population that cannot name past abuses is easier to govern. It cannot demand restitution, cannot map patterns, and cannot mobilize against repetition. Forgetting is political power. Even monuments of resistance are vulnerable. Neglected, vandalized, relocated. Neglect is a form of erasure that passes as benign decay, while the message they carried fades into mere ornamental history. Ask yourself one last time in this block. What would you risk to protect a story that authorities want buried? If you value memory, act now. Subscribe to this channel so we can keep exposing the erasures, the edits, and the lies they bury. The fight for history is a fight for future freedom, and you need to stay connected. History is not destroyed in a single blow. It is dismantled slowly, subtly, until silence feels natural and forgetting feels inevitable. That silence is the most dangerous weapon of all. the act of erasure is always cloaked as progress. Leaders claim it is about unity, modernization, or national healing. Yet behind those words lies the goal of burying accountability and rewriting legitimacy. Ask yourself, when have you heard leaders call for moving on? And did you ever wonder what truths they wanted left behind? The media amplifies forgetfulness. Stories fade from headlines faster than they unfold, and scandals disappear from coverage while their consequences remain. What isn't repeated becomes forgotten. Technology gives unprecedented power to rewrite. Databases can be altered, digital archives can vanish with one click, and entire narratives can be overwritten in seconds. History becomes editable. Social media accelerates this process. Trending topics bury older stories, and platforms optimize visibility for novelty, not permanence. Memory is constantly disrupted by distraction. Have you ever scrolled past something important, only to find it impossible to locate again? That is erasure disguised as noise. Power knows memory is dangerous. A public that remembers injustice is a public that demands change. That is why remembrance rituals are policed, censored, or reframed to remove their sting. Education completes the cycle. By teaching partial truths, institutions raise generations who do not know what was lost. This ignorance is inherited, reinforced, and rarely questioned. Language itself betrays the act. Euphemisms replace clarity. Collateral damage hides slaughter. Necessary reform hides dismantling. Vocabulary is engineered to dull outrage and soften memory. Ask yourself, what events in your country are always described with soft, vague words, and why? Legal erasure follows. Trials are delayed until witnesses die, documents are sealed, and time becomes a tool of amnesty. The clock itself is used to erase responsibility. Culture industries play their role. Films about the past often glorify victories, while failures vanish from scripts. The public inherits a heroic myth, not a complicated truth. Monuments are relocated, plaques rewritten, archives digitized without access. Each act looks innocent, but collectively they reconfigure the memory of entire societies. Grassroots voices try to resist. Community memorials, independent documentaries, whispered stories at kitchen tables. Yet, without amplification, their reach is small, fragile against institutional silence. Have you considered how much of your own family's history has been lost simply because it wasn't written down? Whose stories vanish first? The politics of forgetting thrives on distraction. Scandals pile on scandals until memory collapses under sheer volume. Overwhelm is as effective as censorship. Even when the truth emerges, it is often too late. Witnesses are gone, evidence destroyed, and the story becomes speculation rather than documented fact. Erasure wins by waiting. Ask yourself, how many truths today will only be remembered as rumors tomorrow? Erasure also comes disguised as pride. Narratives of progress overshadow the scars of struggle. Nations celebrate achievements while carefully omitting the human costs that enabled them. Globalization compounds the problem. Stories are homogenized into universal myths while unique, uncomfortable local histories vanish into the margins of culture. Digital dependency ensures fragility. If servers crash, if archives are hacked, if platforms decide content is unsafe, entire chapters of collective memory can disappear overnight. Who controls the servers? Who decides what stays online and what is deleted? These are the new gatekeepers of history. Erasure benefits power. When people cannot trace the roots of their suffering, they cannot demand justice. When they cannot see patterns, they cannot recognize manipulation. Forgetting is the ultimate form of disempowerment. Ask yourself, what injustices are repeating today simply because the last time was forgotten? Resistance requires vigilance. Independent archiving, critical questioning, and public memory work are acts of defiance. To remember is to resist. But memory is costly. Those who preserve dangerous truths often pay with their careers, reputations, or freedom. Silence is safer, and that is why so many comply. The truth is that forgetting is engineered. It is not an accident of time, but a project of power. Recognizing this fact is the first step toward resisting it. And now, the choice is yours. Will you let these stories vanish again into silence? Or will you stand against erasure, against amnesia, against the theft of your own history? Before you leave this video, act. Subscribe to this channel right now. By subscribing, you join a community determined to remember, to question, and to resist. Do not let them erase you along with the past.